Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Higher Moment Mastermind. I'm Shira Litzar, happy to be joined by Vern Schillinger, who's recovering from a cold. So we pray he feels better. So he's a little hoarse, but he's here. And as per usual, this is an open Q&A for any job search questions that you might have on any particular topic. I'm a recruiter and a career coach, and Vern is a former HR executive and also a career coach. And we have lots of perspectives on both sides of the hiring aisle. So you're welcome to ask us anything that you would like. Jacqueline, you have been with us. Jackie, you've been with us before, yeah? You look familiar. You are on mute.
You're on mute.
Okay, and some people prefer it that way. I was with you before the holidays.
Yes, you look familiar.
And then spent a lot of time with family and friends, and now I'm really ready to focus. I've got a session next Tuesday to look at my resume and figure out, I think, Vern, you had challenged me and one other participant last time in our breakout. What are the 3 things you want to do? I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
Well, Jackie, would you like to kick us off with a question?
Okay, a general question. A lot of times, or at least for some people, you probably end up in certain areas of either industry or profession, supporting that with your skill set, and would like to break out of it, or one or the other, or sometimes both, or like focus on a certain area, and that has proven to be a challenge for me.
Are you talking about actually career shifting?
Career shifting, and or perhaps deciding I'm really going to focus on X. I think somebody last time, and I don't recall which participant it was, said that he was going to focus on X. Out of everything that he'd done, this was the thing he most wanted to focus on.
Yeah.
Had perhaps held an executive role and was going to take a step back.
Yeah, right.
Right. And that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, are you literally trying to take a step back?
I think I am. I think I am. I've served as an executive director for the last couple of positions that I've held, and I'm talking over 20 years now. And I think I'd rather focus on something. And I dipped my toe the last go round into workshops, training sessions that I developed and led.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how to make that transition.
Are you looking to go self-employed?
I might, but there are also...
It sounds like that particular kind of field lends itself very easily to that.
Right. And there are also a couple of people who sometime this month I was going to get together with, who are already doing that and looking for added support,
right.
Which seems ideal to me.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that will work out.
Yeah. There are certain kinds of career functions that very much lend themselves to self-employment, training being one of them, right? Because especially in the HR world, right? Most companies are not large enough to have in-house trainers. Right. So whether it's training, whether it's organizational development, executive coaching, things of that nature, those are the kinds of functions that an employer usually would outsource, right, to a consultant. So that's one of the things you want to consider is if you're going to be making a shift, is that kind of shift something that would be insourced typically or outsourced? And if insourced, under what conditions? If outsourced, under what conditions? And of course, networking is going to help you to do that, you know? And so, but I do want to make a mention, and I've shared this with, before many times actually, and this is kind of, I'm springboarding off of what you're saying, Jackie, to kind of a larger conversation around career shifting. Because we hear it all the time, people constantly, right, are saying, oh, the thing that I've been doing for 20 years, I don't want to do anymore for whatever reason. Maybe the functional area is not right for you, the scope of work, the stress involved, whatever, right? Some people are just like, I want to make a move. And Jackie, of course, you've been an employer, right? You've been an executive director. You've been a hiring manager. You know what this is like, what I'm about to say. All employers are risk averse.
Right.
I'll say 99% just to give the benefit of the doubt to the 1% who might not be, but right. Employers are risk averse. And what that means is that most employers don't have time to train. They want people who've been there, done that, have 5 t-shirts,
Right.
who can slide into the job. When you looked at resumes, Jackie, what were you looking for? Somebody who'd been there,
Experience.
done that, right? Who had the
Right.
experience in the professional functions and hopefully had industry experience. And when somebody came to you who was outside of that purview, you did a double like, well, I don't know, and you questioned it. Either dismissed it out of hand, right? Or if maybe the person was referred to you, maybe you gave it another couple second glance and said, what explain to me, how do you, and then if you do end up interviewing the person, you question them. Is this right for you? You know, basically you're saying, are you gonna be a flight risk, right? Is this something that you really want? Are you going to stay for a while? Do you know what you're getting into? Why do you want that? And you're vetting that from the employer's perspective because you have your business needs, and your business needs are current, and you don't want to take a big risk. It's very expensive to hire, and it's certainly expensive if you got to let somebody go, and all the implications of that, right? So you know that, Jackie, and I'm sharing that because I want everybody, when you're in your job search, it's your job to think from the lens of the employer. Now it's their job to think from your lens too. And I, as a recruiter, I'm constantly, preaching to both sides. So I do say this to employers all the time. You got to think about the candidate's perspective, but it's your job to think about their perspective. So if
Yeah,
you
I
are trying to
agree.
make a shift, right, you got to speak in a way they can hear.
The other thing I would add, and thank you for that, Shira, the other thing I would add is you're looking for experience. You're looking for somebody who's enthusiastic and shows a thirst for learning, a curiosity,
Yeah.
because it's rare that you're going to find somebody who has 100% of everything.
Sure.
But if they're excited about learning and show an aptitude for that in some way from their past,
So I
then
would say that you take a very progressive approach. You take the approach of hire an attitude, train on skill.
I think a combo. They have to have some of the skills.
Yeah.
When I think back on the last person I employed who worked out beautifully, but she had probably 80%,
Right.
but was a go-getter,
Sure.
a self-starter, and had already demonstrated a thirst for knowledge and adding new skills. And I think what I would end with, Shira, is when I'm looking at my personal transition, I'm looking at, okay, so what can I do? What skills should I be adding to my toolbox? I pay for the extra money on LinkedIn, and they have all these LinkedIn learning courses. So I'm trying to curate some things that I can do and get some more experience so that maybe somebody would want to hire me.
Yeah, upskilling is important, Vern.
I was just going to say, and we've said this before, but it's just such an important point. And when you're searching for a job, having clarity and focus around, what you're looking for, is just so important in the job search, because when you have clarity and focus, and first of all, when you're looking at jobs and you've got clarity and focus, you can look at that job and say, yes, this is exactly it, or you can rule that job out very quickly. The second reason is when you're talking to people or networking with people, you have a very clear message. It's very specific. And the person, and so if Jackie's telling me about it, her clarity and her purpose and the focus where she's at, and I don't know anything about that, I'm going to say, sorry, Jackie, I can't help you. But you talk to enough people with that same message, and you're going to find people who say, I know people in this area. I can connect you to somebody that you should talk to.
Yeah.
And that's going to go a long way versus, me going out to the job market and saying, I'm looking for a job. Can you help me? And right. I mean, yeah, I'd like to help you, but I don't know what to do for you. So it's that focus and clarity that really is an important part of the job search process. And it's not easy to get there, just as you leave jobs. The other point I would make about that, in terms of career shift, the best way to do it, the safest way to do it, is within an organization. So if you're within an organization and someone says to you, you know, you're in sales and they say, well, Jackie, we'd like you to move into marketing. And Jackie goes, oh, marketing, I don't want to be in marketing. Maybe you don't do it. But if it's within an organization, it's in a much safer environment. And then you leave that organization and you have experience in sales and marketing.
Right.
Now, those opportunities don't come along all of the time within an organization, but if they do, that's something else to think about longer term from a career perspective. As Shira said, I've got a big background in HR. I started in training and development, and my boss at one point says, "I need you to move to HR." I said, "I don't know anything about HR." I was scared. I was scared out of my wits. I said, "I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know anything about that. I'm going to fail." And luckily, this person had confidence in me, and he said, "Look," he says, "I need you to manage and lead the function. It's broken." He said, "You will learn compensation, you will learn benefits, you'll learn it over time. But what I need you to do is manage and lead." And that was transformational for me in my career.
Did you take coursework as you were transitioning?
Uh, in HR, no, not really. I did go. I did go to some. There were some like seminars and things that this was in the Boston area, so there was a 2-day course on. I forgot what it was. Something about HR in the next 5 years or something like that. So I did some of that, but most of it was on the job. And of course, my boss was an expert in HR, so I had a great mentor. So
Wow, that's terrific.
yeah.
So hopefully this is a little bit helpful for you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Susan, good to see you. Glad you could make it. Susan's a longtime friend. So we're going to continue to open up the discussion. Who else has a question that they'd like to pose? Susan.
I have to come. I'll be interviewing shortly, and I haven't interviewed in 5 years, so I have to get ready for that. Pithy, quantitative, really fast down the chute. Does anyone have any tips about online or offline interview practice areas, whether in tutorials, and any information on what the interview process is like currently?
I use LinkedIn interview. It videotapes you and gives you some feedback.
Do you mind putting the link to that in the chat so I can find out how to get there?
Sure. I will look it up. And
Thank you for that. So you actually practice with the computer?
I actually practiced. What I did was I came up with, oh my gosh.
All right, everyone. Good.
Probably 20 questions, but they have specific questions and you can pick the ones you want to answer. And then I practiced, and then I, retrofitted and practiced again. So I will get that for you. And
Shira is great about talking on her feet pointedly and with natural words. She just does that naturally. But when you're in an interview, you really have to consolidate your brain ahead of time. And so I just wanted to see what people thought. My headspace has been in a different area, and I gotta remold
I'm not sure
it.
if I shared this with you, Susan, but I just put it in the chat for everybody. And I have a bunch of videos on my website. This particular one is called Interviews That Land the Offer. It's all about interview prep.
Thank
all
you.
It's an hour and a half presentation I gave to a job seeker group, all about interview prep.
Thank
Research,
you so
questions,
much.
all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
I didn't know if there were clubs where you could actually get together with a person and practice.
Well, actually, the Career Network Ministry,
get your juices going.
So the Career Network Ministry, CNM, they actually have at least one person, if I'm not mistaken, who does interview prep and interview practice. I don't know who it is. You'd have to actually network around, but I'm going to go ahead and pull up CNM's website, or CNM's the meetup group. And here you go. So here's the link.
Thank you.
I believe it's Kevin Corcoran.
Is it?
Kevin
That sounds about right.
Kevin Conopy.
Conopy.
Does anyone have his email? Since you're familiar with him, and does he work with you one-on-one, or is it a group? Or
it's a group. I would
What's his
follow
last name again, please?
Shira's link. because I think that's probably going to be the best way to get in touch with him.
And what is his last name again, please? Corcoran, did you say?
Conifey. I think it's
Conifey, yes.
Connefey. Conifey.
I'll put his link in chat.
And also a colleague,
Susan.
have a colleague that you can sit and chat with. That would
Yeah.
also be helpful.
And Susan,
Well,
in terms of
if anyone here is interested in that, let me know. I have to get greased up.
Susan, one of the most important things you can do in preparing for an interview is to make sure that you've sat down and literally typed up, written out what are your stories? What skills do you have? What are you bringing to the job? And obviously I'm assuming you've seen it. If you found a job position and you're getting the interview, they've seen your resume and they've asked you to come to the interview because your resume looks like it matches up with their job description. And in the interview, when they, ask you specific questions about specific key roles or key skills, you've got to be able to articulate that. And the best way to do that is through a story. And there's a number of different acronyms that are used. Shira uses CAB, C-A-B.
I use CAB. Yeah, there's a bunch of them. The one I like is called Challenge, Action, Benefit.
Yeah.
So what was the challenge the organization was facing? What were the actions that you took and how did the organization benefit? Most people use STAR, Situation, Task, Action, Result. I like CAB because it's more sort of organizationally focused around what was the organization going through, how did they benefit from what you did. It's all the same stuff. It's just telling a story. But it is important to have your story, kind of laid out, because otherwise you can kind of go off, right, into different tangents. Be really clear and almost have like a little arc, right? Like you're watching a movie or you're reading a book, right? They set up the situation for you, kind of get you hooked around, okay, what's the context of this? Then there's some sort of dramatic arc, right? There's always a problem to be solved. There's a hero, the heroine, whatever. And then there's a resolution, okay? Now the resolution doesn't have to necessarily have metrics involved, although that's lovely if there is, but it's more around, okay, so how did everything wrap up well? And even, by the way, if it didn't, what were the lessons learned? You can go that direction as well. But you definitely want to have that arc where it kind of starts up and then it wraps up.
Yeah. You want to write those stories out. You want to practice them in front of a mirror. You videotape yourself on your iPhone. Practice, so that when you get in the actual interview, it's a much easier thing for you to do, to communicate that, because everybody's somewhat nervous in the interview. Every interview is a little bit different in the way each organization and each interviewer approaches the interview. So that's, like I said, really important. Be prepared and be really confident in your skills and your story and how you're going to communicate to the employer.
All right, so it looks like we have some hand raises. Let's go Jerry, then Steve, and then Sarah.
Yeah, one of the things I'd recommend is just have a Zoom session with somebody, record the session, and have them send them a list of the questions you'd like to have asked, and ask them in random, and then get the feedback from ideally that person, maybe 2 or 3 others.
You'll also, if it's recorded, as Jerry says, you'll also be able to see it yourself. And that's one of the most, sometimes that's the most difficult thing for us, to watch ourselves on a video, but that's an important thing to do. And so you can see, well, I could have said that better. Okay, if you can say that better, then figure out how do you say that better, and make sure the next time you get that question, you answer it in that way. So.
All right, Steve.
Yeah, I throwing in on this, I think it's incredibly helpful to take, excuse me, all of these different pieces, as there's no one of them that's going to be the piece for you. There's a combination, it seems, of like all of the different elements of what we're talking about. For me, the 2 things that historically I've seen be really critical to kind of connecting with the hiring managers during that process, or the people that are in that room, is 1, take the moment of pause and make sure that you're actively listening, not just that you're present in the interview, but that you're actually hearing what the person says. And the moment they're done speaking, it's not this, I don't want to say it negatively, like this recitation of here's my cab or star story or this or that. Take the moment of pause and make sure that you're understanding what they're asking. And then two, and it's the toughest thing that I ever had to learn, or really just keep in mind, make sure you're answering the question they asked.
Yes.
Because all of the information you're providing, really critical, does help tell your story, does really enunciate the things that may be on your resume and as part of the process. But it could also very well be nowhere near the question they were really asking. And so for me, if I get one of those and I've taken that moment of pause, that active listening break, and I have a question about what they mean, I'll preface it by saying, happy to answer, but can I clarify? Because I want to know, did they mean this type of thing over here or this type of thing over here? Because that may affect that cab story slightly, or it may allow me to pivot in real time. So I just try to take that step back, and it can be hard to do because interviews are what they are. You're on the spot, you're there, they're trying to gauge you. It's not a totally natural thing for many people to do and be really comfortable with. But it's really important to make sure that you're asking that question and demonstrating to them that, hey, I listened to what you were saying first. Here's the response to that, and being able to go from there. So just my experience with that, take it for what you will.
I cannot echo that enough. I mean, that is spot on. I've actually used almost the same phrases you've used in the past, Steve, about reframing and all of that. I'm so thankful that you brought that up, because it's just so important. And also and I think you alluded to this, also taking that pregnant pause. When they ask you the question, right? You don't have to, I think you did actually say this, Steve, don't just like jump into the cab story, right? Actually pause for a moment. You can say, that's a great question. That's an excellent question. Thank you for asking that. Like even just that, right, will help you to collect your thoughts for a second. And then yes, to Steve's point, you can, reframe it back to them and say, look, I just want to make sure that I'm hearing what you're saying. Is it this? Is it that? Which gives you the clarity, that he's talking about. And that also, again, gives you the time to be thinking. Now, of course, you don't necessarily want to do that every single question. Okay. Hopefully there's some questions that are pretty straightforward, but especially if there's a nuance to it, really important, because I know as a recruiter, happens all the time. I'll ask something and then people just kind of go off into their own thing and not necessarily addressing. So as a recruiter, what do I have to do? I have to double back. I said, well, thank you for that, Anne. What I'm really looking for is, and then I have to probe again, right? So it's really, really important to do what Steve was talking about, reframe it, get clear, probe, make sure that you are hitting the mark on exactly what they're asking for. Now, that said, having your cab stories is important too, because then at least you have something to start with. So what it might be is you have a particular cab story, star story, whatever, and you pull that out of what I call the arrow out of your quiver, okay? And then you just redirect it a little bit. You had been telling the story this way, but just needs to quarter turn to the right? Where you're going to address a particular competency, a particular aspect of that story that might fit their question a little bit better. So the better you know your stories, the better you'll be able to pivot those stories to address the nuance of that question. And remember too, that all of your stories are kind of loaded with a whole bunch of competencies, and something you should know from an interviewer's perspective. So there are two kinds of interview questions. Well, there are more than this, but these are the two major ones: behavioral questions and situational questions. Most people do ask behavioral questions. Behavioral question, what it is, it normally starts out with describe a time when you, tell me about a time when you. What they're looking for are behavioral competencies. So even though you're telling a story, what they're asking you are behavioral questions. So they're saying, describe a time when you used your critical thinking skills, when you had to resolve an issue in a timely manner, you had to work cross-functionally, those kinds of things. A time when you learned, from a mistake, whatever. You've prepared your cab stories. However, you don't know in advance, right, what those competencies are that they're going to be talking about. So what you want to think about is when you're developing your cab story, your star story, what are the behavioral skills, AKA the soft skills, the who you were being when that story was happening. Tell the story, but think about who was I being? Well, I was really using critical thinking skills. I was really engaged with my teammates. I was able to be resourceful, whatever it was. Think about different competencies, because then when the question comes up, you might be better prepared to address it. The other kind of question is situational. Situational is future oriented. Most people don't use it, but some do. And they'll say, and imagine this kind of scenario. If this kind of scenario would happen, AKA this is the kind of thing you're going to be dealing with on our job, how might you handle it? Now, you can't prepare for that in advance, okay? You know, no idea what it's going to be. But in that moment, when they ask you that question, to Steve's point, ask clarifying questions. Ask for more variables, right? They're giving you a case study, is what it is. And they're saying, hey, this isn't a day in our life. This is a moment of time and you might experience. To say, oh, well, is it this kind of variable, that kind of variable? And then you can be thinking about how you want to address it, because they're trying to get you kind of to own the job, sort of be in the role in the moment. So those are the two kinds. They might ask you other kinds of questions that have nothing to do with behavioral or situational things about, I don't know, compensation or culture or your career motivators, you know, what you want to do in your career, why this job is a good fit for you, why did you leave your last job, all those kinds of sort of normal HR questions. But the ones that are really sort of rich are the behavioral and the situational.
Yeah, and in the situational question, as Shira says, it's not used as often, but that is absolutely one where you want to say, well, that's a good question. Let me think back through my career, and let me think about, you know, a time when you know, I was in a similar type of situation, and be thinking, okay, well, you know, where in my career, at the same time you're saying that, you're thinking, okay, well, what example can I use, or how can I answer this question in a way that I think is going to directly hit the target in terms of what they're looking for. And again, with these situational things, when they say, think about a time when, if this was to happen to you, what would you do? It's basically problem solving. If you have an example in your past that's very similar to this, then that's, you know, that's what you want to speak to.
Hope that's helps, Susan.
Rich collection of input. Thank you. And if
You're
anyone needs a practice buddy, please contact me.
Yeah, I would definitely, you know, be willing for anybody here to go through some of those in practical example, or just kind of talk through methodology or what have you, because and I'll say it this way, I learned this very early on. There's a saying, "Повторение мать учения," which in Russian means practice is the mother of learning. And it really holds true. The more you're comfortable with it, the more you're native to it, and you've got that kind of mindset, and it almost becomes muscle memory, if you will. Then you're just reapplying situational factors, as Vern and Shira and others have been talking about, to say, what am I reading in this room? What am I hearing from them? What am I getting the vibe of? And let me clarify that now, because that also helps you as a candidate make it a two-way as much as possible process to say, by all means, give me your questions, interview me, make sure I'm the fit, but let me make sure you're a fit for what I'm really.
You know, it just occurred to me. I know that Kevin Conifee, of course, is doing interview prep, but you know, this could be a really interesting, you know, time to have some of you siphon off and do interview prep with each other, right? Even as a little group, you're all welcome to talk offline. So what I might recommend is, you know, if you're comfortable, put your email, your name and email in the chat. And for those of you who are interested in going offline, maybe, I don't know, Susan, if you want to be the cheerleader here and you know, bring everybody together, you know, do a group email and see when all of you are available to do some interview practice with each other. Why not? You can have a little, you know, sort of siphon off a group, an interview group.
I put my name out there. That's my job search only email. So I talk to Shira on a personal email differently. So, but if anyone would like to be in that group, I'd be glad to help with that.
Yeah.
But I would say I would help organize it, but I would like for someone else maybe to co-lead it because I'm renewing myself in this area, and someone else may have more current
Steve, maybe
current
you could
information.
champion that piece of it.
Yeah, like I said, happy to help. I put my LinkedIn things out there, and that's got ways to contact me. So I'd say for others as well, if you have that, please share it so we can connect and we can get that started from there.
Great. Wonderful. All right. So who else has some questions or topics they want to bring up today? Sarah.
I have a question, but instead, I really want to. I really want to share that I'm so grateful to join this group because it's my first time, and I literally already loving the vibe here,
Oh,
and it's like I just want to sit quiet and listen because it's so helpful. As you were giving some suggestions to Jackie and then Susan, which was very helpful for me as well. Actually, my question is, I I am or I have already shifted my career. Basically, I am a psychosocial counselor by profession. I'm in Pakistan actually, but nowadays where I'm located, it's a remote area. I don't have opportunity here, and I have an experience of 4 to 5 years of working as a psychosocial counselor and a psychologist too. But now I needed to shift my career to online jobs, and then that was very critical thing because the degree of psychology in Pakistan, like in United States or Canada or UK, they don't accept it, and you need to have a license of UK and States. So it was very challenging for me, but luckily I've got a job of online healthcare concierge. I enjoyed that. It was working with, as I'm a person who loves helping others, so it was very which gives me, a sense of fullness. Like I feel very good while doing that job, but I have to quit it because the hourly wage was very low, and the next thing was that actually my baby was due, so I need to actually I wanted leave, but they say that no, we cannot give you leaves, and you can quit and come back again when you are ready for a job. But then my husband and I discussed, and he said, no, you deserve, he says, no, you deserve something better than that, who can offer you a paid leave whenever it's necessary, you are ill or stuff like that. So when I started a job search again, so to be very honest, I have applied for more than 100 jobs, and it was rejected, like the first email. So I really want to know where I'm lagging behind, where, like, what skill set I needed to um, bring it above, like on my resume, and what is, like, I really don't know what is it that I need to work on to have a job. Like, I know I cannot work as a psychosocial counselor out there, but the other jobs, even like where you don't need a proper certifications, even like the concierge job, even I cannot get it back, that job as well. So
this is obviously a very specific kind of question that you have. Unfortunately, we can't go too deep here, right? Because you have a very specific, situation. What I can share generally and partly too, well, let me say it this way. In general, and I mentioned this earlier, employers are very risk averse, okay? Meaning they don't want to take a big risk. So you're not alone in and having difficulty getting your resume accepted. Many, many people have that scenario. And the reason is because the employer is looking for a certain set of skills and you're presenting a certain set of skills. And if they don't match, the employer says, this is not somebody I could consider. And so one of the things I would suggest to you, and I suggest this to everybody, and this is one of the most important things you can do, is to customize your resume for every opportunity. And what that means is you need to go through that job description from top to bottom, from the title to the qualifications, responsibilities, and look and see, where do you have those skill sets? Where do you have that experience? And use the keywords in your resume that match up, and not just use them. You actually have to customize it and highlight them. Okay. So for example, in fact, I'm going to go back to the career change, because that's kind of what you're dealing with, Sarah. So I'm going to take Jackie's scenario, and I'm going to give you guys an example of, bye, Jerry. Nice to see you. Feel better. I'm going to give you an example of years ago, somebody that I've done this multiple times, but this is one in particular that I can remember. So I helped somebody do a career change. Now I'm a career coach, I'm a resume writer, LinkedIn profile, all of that. So that's my background. But I was working with this individual years ago. He was an attorney. And he decided he didn't want to be an attorney anymore. Okay. And so in the coaching, we figured out he wanted to become a writer. How do you turn an attorney into a writer? So what we did was we looked through his background. We pulled out all of the writing experiences that he had as an attorney and highlighted those all throughout his resume. And then on his LinkedIn profile, we turned his LinkedIn profile into a writer's profile. We explained in his about section, what type of writing he enjoyed and why he liked to write and all of these things. He ended up getting a job as a journalist with a legal trade publication. And so basically what happened was the employer said, oh, we're going to allow him to shift in his career from attorney to writer, but he kept the industry, which is legal. So it still made them feel safe that he had a legal background, like legal understanding of the legal profession, but the career focus was changed. And the point of that is that when you are looking at any one of these jobs, you've got to take your resume and start to customize the title. You want to put a headline at the top of your resume that speaks to the job that you're applying for, right? So I don't know what it would be. I didn't quite understand all the kind of jobs you were looking for, but whatever it is, healthcare coordinator or whatever it is, you want to put that at the top in terms of the job that you're looking for. And then underneath, make sure that the keywords that are listed in the job description are highlighted all throughout. And especially because when you're applying online, you're competing with hundreds of other people. So you're just one of many, many, many people that they're looking at. Your competition is very, very stiff. So you have to take the time to customize. Now, in normal situation, I would say that, and maybe you could even do this yourself, is you ideally want to network. So not just apply online, now you're competing with everybody, but you want to network so that you can find somebody who can champion you internally, somebody who can put your name forward to the hiring manager. So for example, you take the name of the company, you can put it into LinkedIn in the search bar in the upper left-hand corner, hit the people button, and then look for the people who work in that company. And if any of those people are second level connections to you, you can look to see who your mutual contact is, your mutual connection between you and that person, and then write to that person, send a connection invitation, say, hi, I noticed you're connected to, I'm sorry, not to the second level, send it to your first level person and say, message them or send them an email and say, hi, so-and-so, I noticed you're connected to Sally Jones, who works at this company that I'm about to apply for, or I just applied for. Would you consider sending my resume to that person for extra consideration? Now, I will tell you, there's a colleague I have who did this with me twice in the last 2 days. In the last 2 days. Her name is Kathy, and I've known her for a long time. And she wrote me for 2 different jobs. She's just reaching out to me as a colleague, not because I'm a coach, just because I'm a colleague. And she's found out on LinkedIn that I am connected to 2 different people, not even the hiring managers, just 2 different people at those 2 different organizations. And she said, hey, Shira, would you mind doing exactly what I just said? Forwarding my resume to that person so that they could send it to the hiring manager. Guess what, Sarah? Both of them said yes. Quickly. They both did. And I was able to write my Kathy back and say, hey, they're going to pass your name to the hiring manager. She had already
How
applied.
lucky she was.
How she already applied. And now she's got one more person internally who's going to champion her. It works. It works.
So think
right?
think of the process, especially if it's an online process, and there's literally could be 1,000 people that applied for the job. They're not going to interview 1,000 people, right? They're gonna have an automatic tracking system to weed out resumes that don't match, and then they're gonna
Right.
get it down to a number, and they're gonna interview 3 or 4 people. So what Shira just said, and it's really a great way to network and have your network help you, to have someone literally get your resume to the hiring manager can make the difference between you getting the interview
Oh, yeah.
and not even hearing back from the
That's
company
right.
that you've
'Cause
experienced.
then you're a real
times.
person. You're a real person that somebody is saying, please just consider. That's all I wrote to the people, to the LinkedIn people. I just said, my colleague Kathy so-and-so just applied for the XYZ job. Would you consider forwarding her resume to the hiring manager for extra consideration? That's all I said. I didn't even say recommend her. I just said extra consideration. That it just means they're like lifting your resume out and saying, here's somebody you should consider. Oh, okay. But again, make sure to use those keywords in the resume. Bridget,
Yeah, I'll set it down today. Thank you so much.
you're
It was very
welcome.
helpful.
You're welcome. Bridget,
Hi, how are you guys? I've
Blessed.
been away for a little while.
Nice to see
Um,
you.
I just wanted to say hello, and I actually had a couple of recruiters contact me because of my resume on LinkedIn. I completely redid my LinkedIn page except for the about section, and I want to give kudos to Jackie. Her about section is just really, it's nice. So I just wanted to say that. But for the most part, my question has to do with the with in the meantime, and it relates to what was just asked. I had the recruiter say, okay, well, we have this job opening. We're at talking to you about your qualifications. It's just that warm up, that cold warm up type meeting. And then they're like, we're going to hand this off to the hiring manager, and then those type of next steps. But my question is, in the meantime, what can I be doing in order to stand out a little bit more? Because I know that at this point, like you said, they have 1,000 candidates. What I know for me personally, what I can do is to continue to develop skills that are relative to that job and put them on my portfolio. But in terms of contacting them, because I'm thinking, let me just wait a week and see if I should go back and contact them. Should it be a week, or should I try to contact them after 3 or 4 days, or should I just leave it alone?
We get a lot of questions about the whole how much do I nudge the recruiter, okay. So I want to answer the question better. I want you to walk a mile in the employer's shoes. I want you to pretend right now that you are the recruiter. Okay. So you have, like you said, hundreds of candidates, and you've got hiring managers breathing down your neck. Oh, where's my next candidate? And what's going, and they're stressed and right, all this stuff. So I want you to think about how you would answer the question for yourself. So you're a recruiter, you've got lots and lots of candidates that you're trying to vet, and you've got all this sort of pressure. How would you want candidates to engage with you? Once you've said, look, I'm going to get back to you. I'm going to vet you, and I'm going to see if you're going to be the next step. We're going to pass you along the next step. Well, how would you want candidates to connect with you?
Yeah, I feel like it depends if I have a process in place, right?
Yeah.
Because if I have a process in place, then wouldn't necessarily what I would want, and I'm sticking to it. you know, like
Huh?
I will contact you in a week.
That's it. That's the
And-
answer.
Yeah,
You just said it.
but then
Yeah.
then there might be someone who could make my life easier because I'm just like, there's 1,000 people. I don't know, you know,
Well, let
someone
me say it
comes
this way,
in and
Bridget.
says, "Hi."
So here's the thing. You asking the recruiter about status isn't necessarily going to push the process along, okay? Because the recruiter is going to make a decision whether
Mm.
you are the right fit or not. You know that old expression, which we don't really love, but I'm just going to say it anyway. It goes from acting. Don't call us, we'll call you.
Yeah.
Remember that, right? The same thing. The reason why they said that, they were recruiters. They were talent scouts. They were the ones making the decision, do we want to move forward? Now, that said, of course, you should send a thank you note. Here's the funny part. Most people do not send thank you notes to the recruiter. They'll send thank you notes to the hiring manager, but they usually do not send a thank you note to the recruiter. That is one thing that'll make you stand out. Promise you.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, in that thank you note, to really express your interest level in the role, because employers actually do want to know if this is something that you're excited about. They're thinking about whether they're excited about you, but they also want to know whether you're excited about them. But in terms of like saying, hey, what's the next step and what's going, they really will call you. They'll, as I say, they'll send you a carrier pigeon if, right, you're the one that they need, that they'll track you down, basically, if they're interested in you. Now, if you're curious and it's been, let's say they said, we're going to get back to you in a couple weeks, and it's been 3 weeks or 4 weeks and you haven't heard anything, sure, you can send one follow-up note and say, I just want to make sure, just want to know if this, I'm still a viable candidate, to know if I should keep this job in the hopper. That's fine. They may or may not respond, but at least you can just, ping them, but only do that after they've indicated that, if it's past the time that they said that they would be getting back to you. But otherwise, Bridget, just put it out of your mind. Honestly, it's one egg in your basket. Let them do their thing. If they reach out, they reach out. They don't. You send your thank you note. You can ping them one time. Fine. Now, if there's something interesting, like an article that you found that you think would be relevant to the role, relevant to the company, that's also a very nice thing to do, to say, hey, I was thinking about you guys, found this online, maybe you want to forward this to the hiring manager, maybe it would be helpful for them. That's a nice gesture. Vern, did you have something you want to add?
Well, Bridget, I wasn't clear. The recruiter you're speaking of, is this a recruiter with the company? Is this someone from the company, or is
Good
this an
question.
Yeah.
independent, or is this an independent recruiter?
question.
Recruiting,
Yeah, and that's the concern for me, because like when you have an independent, when they might not understand the nuances of the job sometimes.
Right.
So the last one was an independent recruiter. Actually, I feel like there's two. No, I think it's all three. I think it's all, no, two and one, I'm sorry. But the last one who I spoke with was an independent recruiter. And it's for a future federal contract that the company still is awaiting to sign.
That's different.
Yeah.
That actually, Bridget, of everything you just said, that's the
Uh-huh.
game changer in this conversan.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's why I say it.
Yeah.
You really need to know that. That's why an independent recruiter versus an in-house recruiter, how you handle that could be a little bit differently. And if they're waiting on the government contract, then you're not going to hear anything until they get
That's
the
exactly
government
right.
contract signed. So
it's just like, how do you
nothing
say?
You don't even have to do anything, Bridget, honestly, because they're
Okay.
vetting so many people for the possibility of getting that's what they're doing. They're trying to recruit to present names, to say or rather to be ready if they do get it. That's the most amorphous of everything, like of all the scenarios, because that's not actually really a job.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
It's not.
Not yet.
It's not yet.
Yeah.
So there's
Yeah.
nothing you can do about that. Even if you touch base 100 times, there's nothing they can do until they get unless they win the contract. Now you can ask them, what's the time frame of that? When do you expect to know?
What's the estimated time?
Yes, the estimated time for knowing whether they're going to win the contract. There you go, March. That's your answer. There's nothing they can do until March.
Yeah.
That's your answer. Nothing they can do.
Which is a little bit different if it's an independent recruiter and they are being hired by a company to find candidates for an open job that they do have. You know, so there's just different, you know, nuances to how you handle that depending on, you know, who you're dealing with.
And the one that I think was most associated with the company, and I'm sharing this because I know it might help someone. It was a startup, and they're like, we're hiring many positions, so we're just checking out to see see who's there. You know, like it's kind of like we're just, you know, gathering on their own too. So you have a startup that's hiring many positions, and they're still adjusting, and they can't talk about the day to day.
That's right.
And so is that, it sounds as though it's possible to follow up, like the thank you, it was nice talking to you, but yeah, so in that situation where they're kind of going through all different types of jobs, what
Even
would you
even that's even more amorphous, right? It's like,
Yeah.
just let them do their thing. If they figure out that you're a right fit, that's again, same thing. There's no job there. They're just testing the market. Nothing wrong with that. They're just seeing who's out there. We're doing market research is really what it is, but for candidates.
Okay.
And if the startup takes off, they'll start hiring. If the startup folds, then again, as Shira said, there was really no job there, and there won't be a job there because the company's now gone.
And look,
So,
you can certainly follow up with them a month later and say, hey, and again, they do the thank you note. You can follow up and say, hey, you know, just circling back to see where you are, and you can remind them of you. That's fine.
And
Again,
again, this is another area where if you're really interested in the startup or whatever, and if it's something that really is you're interested in, you know, do whatever research you can, find out what's going on with that startup. Now, you may not to, because there's a lot of startups are so private, they, you know, you won't be able to find any information. The other possibility is to, you know, talk to people in your network who are associated with that particular industry or that particular area of expertise in the world. Do they know anybody who's involved in that startup? And, you know, potentially they could connect you to that person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I have one last question. I don't want to take it away from anyone else.
That's okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
The other question was in regards to salary, right? The salary discussion, which was kind of a little bit difficult, because it's just like, well, what are you looking for? And I'm like, well, what is your range?
I know. Yeah.
And then with the range question out, because of the job that was presented to me, and looking at it, like doing a little quick research myself, I'm like, they started with a low range, and then I was just thinking about, okay, these recruiters might get 20% or 10% or whatever.
Never worry about that. No, seriously,
Okay.
let me just press pause right there. Never, ever, ever, ever think about the fee that the employer is going to give them, because that actually has nothing, thankfully, that has nothing to do with the salary per se. Because the salary is the salary, and then the employer knows they're going to pay a fee on top of that, but don't ever worry about percentage.
Okay. All right. So I kind of, regardless, it was a senior position. It was a senior role with the company. So I went kind of mid-high from what they provided, and kind of went like between, like, sorry, because it's hard to do this without an example, and I don't want to
you can
give an
use
example.
pick random numbers if you want.
Random numbers. Okay. So let's say they said 90. They're like, okay, so that's 90 to 95, and I'm looking at the thing, or like I'm looking at what people are typically paid, and it's more like 100. And so I'm going to, okay, well, 95 to 120, you know, and I make that suggestion, and it's just like, oh, okay, well, we'll have to look at your qualifications. And I'm like, I just explained my qualifications.
Well, it's not that what they mean by that is, if HR oftentimes has these salary bands Okay. And they have, and
Mhm.
then when they're looking at a real candidate, they'll look at their
Mhm.
qualifications, compare that to the salary band, say for these kinds of qualifications, we're going to pay X. So that's not something that they can determine in the interview. That's something that they do afterwards. Okay, when they're doing an
Okay.
evaluation of top candidates and who's where in the market and salary bands, it's a formal process that some HR people go through with larger companies. Yeah, they're not
Yeah.
going to be able to say to
Okay.
you right then, oh, we just heard that your qualifications are X, so we're going to pay you Y. It's more of like
Mm.
thoughtful, do
Yeah,
some.
can I jump in real quick? They're just trying to negotiate with you. If you feel that
Mhm.
you want this amount of money, stay there. Then
Yeah.
they'll come back to you later, but don't. It's a song and dance, and
Mhm.
the last person that talks loses.
Well,
Yeah, and
it
it's
is a
just
negotiation.
I'm really cautious about that in terms of when it comes to that financial realm, because sometimes I notice, and I speak from a woman point of view, a lot of us tend to lowball ourselves and
That's
put
right.
it too low.
Yep.
And I don't want to do that. I want to like make sure that I'm in
So,
the appropriate range.
To Kelly's point, it is a
Mhm.
negotiation, and they are always trying to. Bye, Vern. Good to see you. They're always
Bye,
trying to
Vern.
get you as
Take
low as
care, everybody.
possible.
Have a good week.
Bye, Barb.
Bless you. They're always trying to get you as low as possible. That's just a business decision that they're trying to make. So
Well,
Kelly's
that's
absolutely right. So
Yeah,
your
I
job
took.
is always to go to the top end as much as you possibly can. So if they say,
Okay.
like you said, the 95, you say, actually, what I'm looking for more is, and then another percentage above that. And then they can say to you, well, actually, we can't do X. The highest we can go is 95, or the highest we can go is 100.
Mhm.
Then they'll say, do you have any flexibility? And you can say, well, can we talk about the benefits package? And then you can
Yeah.
make it about the total compensation. But yes, always, 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 always go for the high end.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I got lowballed and I was desperate and took a job, and they also promised me a job as an outside sales rep, but they wouldn't put it in writing. And of course, they reneged on it when the time was coming, and I got screwed totally. But so I learned a lesson. But it's lesson learned. But now it's just, if they really want you,
Mhm.
stand firm, because
Stand firm.
once you get in there, it's hard to get a raise afterwards to where you want to be. So
Exactly.
That's right. Your best time to negotiate is right up front.
yeah. So
Okay.
sorry, to my 3 cents in.
Yep. Go high. Thanks, Kelly.
Yeah.
All right.
Building on the salary question, Shira. and
Oh,
everyone
actually,
else.
so sorry, Susan. I'm not, I think Steve, I want to be respectful of
Oh,
order.
sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Hold
no,
up, hold up, point.
and this is part of the active listening thing too. So I'm really happy that we're on this topic, Bridget. I guess my experience has been, whether an employer is practicing pay transparency or not, and that's getting a lot of talk, obviously, within every industry nowadays. Whether they practice that, they put that range out there up front, whether it's based on, as Shira was talking about, those kind of considered factors once they have a candidate match or what have you, or the bands as she was talking about it. My experience has been most HR professionals within their realm or scope, or the hiring manager / operations lead, CEO, what they have a pay scale in mind they want to go to market for, whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, whether it's matched to the industry comps and all of these pieces. They've got a range in mind before they go into a hiring process. Now, what I've typically done when I've gotten the question, when somebody has actually asked the question about what are you looking for in terms of compensation, it can be the very unnerving question for all the reasons you pointed out there, of selling yourself too low, not knowing how to tip that scale in your favor, going as high as all of those play into it. What I have typically found good success in is saying, look, what I typically do is, when we get to the stage where you're presenting an offer, I will take that information and look at the market compensation factors myself, meaning the pay ranges against industry, tenure, all of these pieces myself, in consideration for what I'm looking for. I put that out there to say, look, if you're going to tell me what the range is, that's fine. You're giving me a piece of information that I can say, that kind of fits or that kind of isn't, based on what I've been paid in the past. Am I being fairly compensated to industry? Do I know that? I'm basically putting it out there saying, look, provide the offer range, tell me what you're thinking of. I'm going to go back and do my own research because I always do that, and go from there. If they tell you that range up front, and I've had a few positions I've posted for and recently where they've actually put that in there up front, I've been able to see, well, based on what your job description is, and all of the details therein, and also what I know about the industry, I don't have to go back to my contacts at ADP or MRA or somebody that's doing benchmarking surveys. I know for this region, city, what have you, yes, you're in the medium compensation range or whatever that is. That's acceptable to me. And in cases where I don't, I'm still giving myself the out to go back and leave that negotiating, again, golf metaphors I don't like, but that club in my bag to say, hey, I'm very interested in the role. I'm going to do the research. Thank you for the offer, and I'll consider the total comp, and we'll go from there. I'm not saying it's right for everybody, but I generally don't want to tip my hand for that part of the process when there's 12 other things that have to come before it in terms of culture, fit, reasonable work-life balance, all of the things that really go into making a good fit for a position that I want them to consider and I want to consider of them before you even get the salary. So just, again, my experience with may be a little different, may not be for everybody, but I want to leave that club in the bag to say, hey, I'm going to consider your offer. Because the other thing it does is somebody comes in based on what they're saying, to Shira's point, hey, we can't afford to give you this. We're going to give you this. We're able to offer this, but you can see that number already up front is not even outside of your range, but outside of industry or kind of norms or mediums. That tells you something as well about the company and kind of maybe how they process. So I leave that for your consideration.
There's a lot of variables that
Yeah.
Stephen was good variables that Stephen was pointing out. And it's so interesting because I deal with hiring managers, right? In fact, right now I'm starting a new search, and this is a company, an organization rather, that to Stephen's point, right, it's been figuring out, well, what do we pay for the market? And interestingly, the employer, while she's allowing me to put the pay in the posting because I'm pushing it for pay equity and transparency reasons, she actually, I'm doing that on a privately, meaning I'm going to link through LinkedIn, and I'm going to be searching for candidates. Right now, she doesn't actually want me to post this job online because she's afraid of her internal employees seeing the posting and seeing what this person is going to be making, because she's afraid that it's going to upset the apple cart internally. Oh, so-and-so is making such and such. Now, this is exactly the reason why we have pay transparency laws now, so that everybody can see it. But she, as an employer, is very concerned because of the emotional upset that it might cause some people. So this is exactly the issue that we're trying to face right now in society about transparency versus, employers feeling like they don't want to deal with the mess that's involved with it. That's a different story. But the point is that not everybody is going to post the numbers. And if they do, yes, to Stephen's point, yeah, you can hold your cards back if you like. That said, everything Stephen said is great. There's the and, okay. The other side of it is be aware of the fact that the less you negotiate up front, the more time you could be wasting at the end. Now, I'm not saying that there's a weighing here. You've got to make that decision for yourself, but understand when you take the time, you can say, oh, well, sure, I'm kind of in your range. You go through the whole process. And then if you decide that it's not, that the range is not, what you want, now you've spent hours of your life, right, in this process, which is actually why the employer often will try to figure that out up front to say, are you in our range? We want to make sure we're maximizing everybody's time here so that we're not dealing with a turn down at the end and everybody's loves you and you love them and you're like, oh, well, no, we're $10,000 off. So to the extent that you can figure this out in advance, do your market research like Stephen was talking about, even if they don't post the range, especially if they don't post the range, right? Glassdoor can be marginally helpful, kind of, at least something. But then, yeah, see what else you can figure out. But the more you can know up front around what your range is, what's market, industry, size of organization, all those different things, geography, so that you can come into that first meeting and they say, what are you looking for? And you can say X. And if they have a pay range, again, go to the top of it. But my recommendation is try to do as much of that up front so that you're maximizing your time even in the interview process. Okay.
Thank you.
Susan?
Thank you. Excuse me before. I had 2.5 questions for Sharon team. Building on the salary discussion, a lot of times initial screening recruiters in-house will not reveal a salary range, and you're stuck in a standoff. So one question is, what do you do in that situation? And number two, when they do post a salary range, like on Indeed or LinkedIn, is it accurate? Like, is the employer posting that, and is it accurate?
I'll answer the second question first. Yeah, if they're actually posting this is not, by the way, what Indeed is thinking that the job pays. But if in the job posting, they say salary is 92,110.
Oh, well, when Indeed has it at the top.
No. That's Indeed's assumption. They're like,
Okay.
well, we kind of think that's probably in the right now.
Got it.
No, the only time you can trust it is if literally in the job posting
Thank
at
you.
the bottom, they say salary is this.
Thank
That
you.
you can trust. Yeah. What was your first question again?
When you're in a screening interview with
Oh yeah. And they don't post the range.
and they will not, when they say, what do you want to be paid? And you say, well, what could you tell me what the range is?
And they say no, and then they punt it back to you. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the old
you're in a standoff. And my experience before now is you better answer that question if you want the job, because they'll kick you out.
That has been the traditional mindset, and frankly, the way that I've always prepped candidates until the last couple of years. I've always prepped people to not assume that they're going to give you the range, because they never did before. Now we're in a little bit of a different situation. But if you go back to the old traditional model, your job is to do the research up front. Your job is to figure out what your range is, and really what I call your happy dance number. Okay. What is that high end, top end number that's going to make you do a happy dance? Yes, relative to the market. Okay, you got to look at all those things. But once you do all that research, you're like, nah, my real top end is here. It's negotiating 101. Same thing like buying and selling a house. I always give that analogy. Right. So one wants to pay as little as possible. One side wants to get as much as possible. It's the same exact thing. You want to get as much and they want to pay as little. So, what do? You're selling a house, you put the top end number, right? And you see what you can get for. You're not gonna put the low end number, you're gonna put the top end number. You're the seller, so to speak. Okay. And you see, so there's a phrase a formula that I use. And I say, they say, well, what are you looking for? You say this. You can want to write this down, Susan, if you want. I'm seeking a total cash compensation package in the blank range. Now, I notice I said the word range, but I don't really mean range. I'm using range like a euphemism for kind of in that general area. You're not going to give them two numbers. The second you give them two numbers, which number are they going to give you? The low one. So you say, I'm seeking a total cash compensation package in the $100,000 range, in the $150,000 range, in the $90,000 range, whatever it is. And, but you put one number there. So they're going to hear the one number and they're going to determine, are you in their range? And if you are, great. And if you're not, if you're above the range, that's when they're going to say to you, well, actually, the highest you said 150. Like, well, the highest we can really go for this is 125. Then they're going to give you their top end. They're not going to say it until you go above them. Highest we can go for this is 125. Susan, do you have any flexibility? Well, says Susan, can we talk about the benefits package? Okay. Then you look at total compensation, but you're still giving them your top end, because the fact is, if you're saying 150, that still means if that's your happy dance number, that still means to me you've got some flexibility below that. Make sense? So it's go top, go high. All right. All right, so I'm looking at the time here. Any other last minute questions? Because otherwise we'll go ahead and wrap up.
I just want to thank you, Cher, for pulling this together on your own time, and everybody else. Yeah,
you're very welcome. So right now we're going to go ahead and wrap up the call. And as I usually do, for those who want to hang on the call, I'm going to do a short prayer call. So you're welcome to stay on if you would like to do so. And for anyone else, I will look forward to seeing you next week. Lord willing. All right. Have a blessed day, everyone.